What area of what culture are you most passionate about that you cover?
Hi guys, I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture.
And I'm Andy Murray from WhatCulture, and you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
Subscribe below.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and I'm back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Josh Brown from WhatCulture.
Hello, Tom. How are you doing?
To the show. I'm good. I've been really looking forward to this one. I'm not going to lie. So,
Me too.
if we take this back, actually, normally I'd ask if we take this back, but if I was to ask you, what areas of WhatCulture do you cover? Can you let the good people know?
I can. Essentially, as I was just saying to you before we started recording, pretty much everything except wrestling, So I'm mainly on the WhatCulture main channel, which is film and TV based, and WhatCulture gaming and WhatCulture horror. Though I am known to dabble in WhatCulture comics and WhatCulture Star Wars from time to time as well. So essentially anything that I can get my hands on, I'm like ravenous for the content. I want to consume it as much as possible.
Fair enough. Why no wrestling? Is that purely you're not a fan, or is that just not something you've been asked to do?
To be honest, it is just something that I was really into as a kid. Wrestling was something I lived and breathed when I was growing up with my brother and my cousin, and we would watch it all the time, play all of the games. However, they just kind of got to a point where, because I couldn't watch it on television and it was difficult to keep up with it, as I got into kind of my teen years and into college and whatnot, I just sort of fell out with it. But I would keep up with it, through news, through Twitter, or through the headlines of the pay-per-views and whatnot. So I actually get my fix of wrestling just from the fellas in the office, just hearing it through osmosis from them.
Fair enough.
It keeps me a bit interested in it, but sadly never got around to actually diving back into it properly.
We won't spend too much time on wrestling because that's not what this conversation is about. But is that something you would like to dive back into, or is that something you've sort of put away and are like, that was a part of my life back then, this is my life now?
Honestly, it's just a time thing. If I had infinite time, I would absolutely get into it. But it's just, I'm sure if you're watching WWE and AEW, that's a lot of content per week on top of the stuff that I'm already interested in. And it's kind of the time commitment that I find the most difficult to circumvent.
Okay, fair enough. But moving on to your good self, if I was to ask you, what area of what culture are you most passionate about that you cover?
See, that's so difficult because it's a cop-out answer, but it genuinely depends on the day. I'm passionate about it's difficult because when I first started WhatCulture, it was with the gaming section. I was a gaming contributor, so I would write lists for the website. And when I came in, it was mostly as a gaming writer. But at the same time, while I was doing that, I was in university covering film. So I also kind of wanted to break into that area as well. So it genuinely just depends on the mood I'm in. Both gaming and film and television especially kind of go hand in hand. They've always been my two big passions. And WhatCulture has always been great because it's the only place where I've been able to pursue both and kind of get the outlet where I can do both at the same time.
Fair enough. If you stopped being passionate about one of the areas that you're currently pursuing, would you have to be like, sorry, WhatCulture, can I step away from this? Or do you think you could still cover, say for example, you stopped loving gaming for whatever reason, could you still cover it, or would you have to say to WhatCulture, look, can I step away?
That's a good question, because it's kind of on the one hand, I think I could cover it. You know what I mean? I would have the capabilities to do it, but would the content be as good? Because I think, you've got to care deeply about what you're covering in order for it to be engaging and for it to be compelling and for it to be entertaining. And I think people would kind of know if you were just phoning it in almost, if you were doing it by the numbers because that's what your job was and what have you. So I think if I did kind of fall out of love with one section, I would try to, and I'm sure it would be reciprocated, I would try to be like, can I step away from this a little bit, focus on this area because that's what I'm, really more engaged with, because ultimately I think you'll get better content out of it that the viewers will like more.
Yeah, fair enough. So moving on to your journey to WhatCulture, what is like your background that led you there? Were you a fan before you started watching?
Well,
before you started
enough,
working, should I say?
This all comes back to Scott Tailford, who I know you've already had on the show, because
What a guy.
A great guy, and literally would not have a career or be doing the things I'm doing without that man. Because during university, like I said, I realized that I wanted to be a writer first and foremost. So I was contributing for a lot of different sites, a lot of it kind of unpaid in the realm of film and television and gaming. And then one day through our university system, I got a message from Scott Tailford, who was looking for new writers for the website at the time. And it was one of those moments where I thought, I'm passionate about this stuff. I've got this portfolio at the moment, so I might as well give it a shot, So I emailed Scott back with this submission that honestly wasn't very good. I was very arrogant about it, and I hadn't properly looked at the website, and it wasn't as good as it could have been. But Scott managed to give me a chance. So then for a couple of years while I was in university, I was a contributor for the website from 2015 to 2017. And I was writing regularly that way, was talking to Scott, kind of building up this relationship with him. And then in the months following graduating from university, Scott kind of sent me a message being like, we've got this position. I think you should go for it. And even at the time I was thinking, I'm not going to do that. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't really want to embarrass myself almost. But he kept pushing. He was like the guy who was going, no, you can do it, man. Like, come on. Like, I think you'll be really good for this job. And then eventually that made me submit. And then I went to the interview. And then I kind of joined the company proper 2 years after I started writing. But you asked me there if I was a fan before I started the job proper. And the answer is no, but it's not because I didn't like the content. And this is kind of where I get a bit weird with kind of like what I let myself enjoy. I wasn't a fan and I didn't watch the content because I didn't want to get too invested in case they turned me down, if that makes sense.
I get you totally. It's almost like you don't, the analogy I'll use is you don't want to talk to the pretty girl if you have to see her every day. Right, if she turns you down. That is a stupid analogy, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Totally. I know exactly what you're trying to say. I didn't want to get too invested in these people that I only would have known through the screen and build up too many expectations, I suppose, if I was going to get rejected or if it wasn't going to work out. I didn't want to put all my eggs in that basket. So when I did get accepted, it was like a real pleasant surprise. Obviously I was really excited to work with everybody then, but I wasn't going into it kind of already aware of the people involved or even really how it worked necessarily. Like my first day was such a big surprise because I hadn't seen the office. I only knew Scott really. So it was kind of like being thrown at the deep end, but ultimately it worked out in that way.
Fair enough. Everyone that I have spoken to from WhatCulture was some sort of fan from them. So how do you think maybe it made your transition easier or harder in some ways not being a fan?
Certainly harder in one sense because everyone at WhatCulture genuinely is so genuine, and I think their personalities come through in the videos. So then if you were to meet those people in real life, like you kind of know what to expect in a lot of ways, whereas I hadn't met these people before. So in that sense, it was kind of getting to know everyone and kind of like getting to understand what they were doing, what their likes were, what they were doing in the content itself, and kind of navigate those relationships. But at the same time, I guess it also meant that I didn't have expectations that could be shattered, perhaps, or I didn't view someone as someone that they weren't, or kind of like it was just sort of a blank slate for me, which was really good. And then I got to fill in the kind of sketches on top of that.
I know you said to me in DMs today that you didn't have much interaction with the original What Culture gaming crew, which is Ben Potter and Peter Austin. But how much of their content have you gone back and maybe watched if you weren't a What Culture? Basically, how much of their content have you gone back and watched?
Not loads, but obviously when I was first starting, and while those lads were still there, obviously they were so instrumental. They were such like an instrumental part of the gaming channel at the time. So, I would like look at their videos when I was first starting to try and get a hang of how, scripts were supposed to be written, how things could be delivered and whatnot. So like they and everyone else there at the time, like very much kind of established the model that we would be working off of afterwards. But sadly, I didn't really get to work with them all that much. I was only there for a few months before they ultimately left. So sometimes I see them in Newcastle and we're friendly that way, but unfortunately didn't get a chance to properly work with them, because like I said, when I first joined as well, I was only a writer. I wasn't even a presenter for a little while. So we kind of worked in different parts of the gaming team.
Yeah, and we'll get into the transition from writing to presenting in a minute. But what is one lesson or maybe something you picked up from watching them just a little while in the office? This is Ben and Peter, that maybe you're like, oh, I wish I could have learned more from them on that front.
I think like across the board, I suppose it's just like authenticity and passion. It's like, when the channel was first starting, I think everyone kind of had their own unique point of view and unique perspective. And I wouldn't say gimmick, but you know what I mean? Like they brought something to the table that you couldn't necessarily find in other list channels that were perhaps a little bit more mechanical or whatnot. So that was kind of what I focused on at the beginning and learned from the people who had already been doing the presenting for a little while I was there, was just to hopefully try to inject a little bit of personality into the content.
Where do you think you'd be if you never got that message from Scott Tailford saying, do you want the job?
Honestly, I dread to think about it. I really dread to think about it. I don't know, because one of my biggest failings as a person even now is that I'm incredibly indecisive and I need someone to kick me up the butt to do things. So I would be hoping to do what I am doing now, but whether I would actually be doing it or not, I can't honestly say. It would definitely have been deferred a few years down the line if he didn't message me doing that. I would probably be doing all of this just for a personal blog that 2 people would read, which would be still good, but
Yeah. What is the biggest lesson when it comes to your job that Scott has taught you?
Literally,
that was very strange.
Yeah, sorry. I've just gone incredibly dark here. I should be coming back on in a second. Lessons learned. Literally, again, not to blow his trumpet too much, but
he won't see this. You're good.
He will. He definitely will. Oh God, again, where to start? With the writing side of things, it was definitely having the confidence to be able to put your opinions forward. Like if anyone's met Scott Tailford, you'll know how confident in his opinions that he is. So before, when I was first starting out, I was a little bit gun shy at, maybe going all in on a certain perspective or a certain take. And I like to think that, he taught me to be more confident in my own thoughts, in my own ideas and conveying them. And certainly as a presenter, he was instrumental in just helping me learn the ropes. My very first video ever was with Scott and Jules, and they were kind of incredible at walking me through it as we were filming. I was unbelievably shy making those first videos, and still I'm quite shy doing it today. And I was petrified of the lights, of the camera, of all of that stuff. And they were just so warm and welcoming and helpful in giving me kind of the space to be confident in those videos and to in the ability to let me take parts of them and, you know, lead parts of them while having them to fall back on while I inevitably rambled on like I'm doing now.
Fair enough. What is something you talked about your early days of presenting and being what I would almost call a deer in the headlights sort of thing?
Definitely.
But what is a lesson that you've learned, say, the time that you've been presenting, that you would say to yourself, like, if you could see yourself when you were first presenting? That was very wordy. I do apologize.
No, it's good. I understand what you mean exactly. Two things, honestly. One, that it's okay to mess up. You don't need to do everything on the first take. Like, I used to be so self-conscious about not being able to get a certain line out when I was recording a voiceover, and say recording it 5 times before I got the one I wanted, because I was so stressed that someone would hear it and think, why is he taking so long? Why is he having to do this over and over again? But I think when you're presenting and you're recording and you're doing voiceover work or anything, you have to be happy with the work that's going out, and just give yourself the space to fail and to get it wrong before you get it right, because all of that stuff will be cut out. All of that stuff won't be seen. It's only you and maybe an editor who's going to see the bad parts, and everyone else will hopefully see the good parts. So that's definitely kind of one thing I would say, is just give yourself some breathing room. Don't try to get it all in one take. Allow yourself to mess up a little bit. And the second one, I think, is like, don't imitate what you think a presenting style should be. That's an issue that I had when I was doing my first voiceovers. Like, I can't even listen to those anymore because they're so
We'll get to that.
false.
That's a question that I ask later.
Okay, I won't go into that too much. But yeah, I felt like they were quite forced in their delivery, because I was trying to imitate what I thought a voiceover should sound like, rather than what was my own natural way of doing voiceovers. So yeah, I would just say, give yourself the space to experiment on that front, and make more mistakes than you make successes in that space, because ultimately the mistakes can be discarded at the end of the day.
Fair enough. How important, this is something that I've never asked a presenter, how important do you think editors are to making videos?
Editors, I always say this, I would not be doing this podcast right now, Tom, if editors didn't make me look good for the past 5 years. Editors,
I got to edit this myself. You realize that, right?
Totally. Well, this is the thing, right? Because before I started WhatCulture in university, part of the was film production. So I actually did a lot of editing, not to the extent that, you know, a lot of people do, but I did a lot of editing beforehand. So I kind of understood how tasking it is, how kind of meticulous and how much patience you need to like go through these big edits to chop them down and make them presentable. And honestly, every editor at WhatCulture that I've had the pleasure of interacting with over the years has been like incredible. The attention to detail is amazing. And I always am amazed that they can take this raw file that I give them that sometimes, you know, like 80% mistakes and 10% good stuff, and they can transform that into something that is engaging, something that is snappy, something that is ultimately entertaining. Like totally, like obviously voiceover presenters and writers are important, but like the content that people watch, like it wouldn't be anything without people editing and constructing it and putting it together.
Fair enough. So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, and also to be completely transparent, I don't want the Zoom to crap out as we're talking. We're going to go into a segment now that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests basically their favorite things about the things that they cover. So like, for example, I'm going to ask Josh his favorite video game of all time, his favorite movie of all time, and in his case, his favorite horror film of all time. So what is your favorite video game of all time, Josh?
Tom, first off, this is like a pleasure. All I want anyone to do is to ask me all of these questions, and now I've had the joy of being.
This is what I literally just say. Like, now you'll have a place to go, look, I've answered this. Please don't ask me this anymore.
That's great. Favorite video game is I always think about this because it kind of changes over the years, but right now it is Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas, I think is an incredible experience from top to bottom. When it comes to open world RPGs, I think you can't get much better in terms of its sense of immersion, in sense of its role-playing possibilities. The environment of that game is so tantalizing to explore. And a lot of games kind of give you the selling point that, you can impact the world. Your choices have consequences. But Fallout New Vegas kind of does that in such a novel way, in a way that really isn't just kind of black and white, good versus evil. Like, there is so much nuance to your role as a character in that world. And everything from the RPG mechanics to the killer soundtrack, I was listening to it literally today, kind of like stands the test of time. Even though it got a lot of ridicule at launch for having a lot of bugs, I honestly don't think they matter, because the core of it is so special. And even though I love the other Fallout games, I just think that is a league above it.
Fair enough. So, talking of that, what is your most underrated game that no one talks about?
Oh, that's another great question. Underrated game. Right now, I'm going to have to say one that I played earlier this year and did a video about. Actually, I was really lucky, was able to just pour my heart out over this game called Before Your Eyes, which is this first-person story-driven game where you relive the life of someone who is currently in the afterlife, kind of awaiting a trial. And they essentially are on that trial, and someone is going through their entire life to figure out whether they're worthy enough to kind of, venture.
So it's a bit like the TV show, The Good Place.
A little bit like that.
If you know what I'm talking about.
I do. It is kind of like that with a more personal edge, because like a lot of it is flashbacks to the time on Earth. And it's just, I don't want to say too much because it's best experienced like going into it knowing as little as possible. But that was one of the few games that like left me in tears. Like, I finished that game and I kind of shut my laptop down and I was just sobbing. It was so affecting and it was so emotional. And I would recommend people if they just want a kind of really, meaty story.
Fair enough. And then what about favorite TV show of all time?
TV show is can I cheat? Because it's tied. It's tied between two.
Yeah.
It's potentially a quite obvious answer, but it's The Sopranos and it's Mad Men.
I knew you were a Sopranos fan just based on how much they come up in your lists.
They do. They come up on my lists on the social media all the time.
The best one was your ridicule of when his mum dies. That's my favorite thing ever.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's so wonky. But anyway, I will leave that for the list. But yeah, that was such a strange choice in a TV show that's otherwise impeccable. But yeah, I think both of those shows, The Sopranos especially, even though The Sopranos was kind of the first show to really kickstart, like prestige TV as we know it right now, I still think it's the best. I still think it took risks that you don't see.
It's the first bingey show as well, I would say.
Yeah, totally. It was definitely a show that, still inspires shows to this day, over 20 years later. I think that's 20 years. Yeah, it's about 20 years. Yeah, about that. Yeah, it's great.
Favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie of all time, Shaun of the Dead. It might cross over with the horror movie one, but I will change my answer for that. But yeah, Shaun of the Dead was the movie that got me into making movies. Like, that was a film that I watched over and over again as a kid, and even now I think it holds up. I think horror comedies are really difficult to do because a lot of directors lean more on the comedy aspect and kind of forget to make an emotionally gripping movie. But Shaun of the Dead is both. When it needs to be a horror movie, it is a proper scary horror movie with stakes and emotional depth, but also it's really funny and really rewatchable and really well put together. And listening to the director's commentary on the DVD of that.
That's something that I miss with streaming. Director's commentary.
Me too. Funnily enough, Tom, I was thinking about this the other day because I watched Shaun of the Dead through a streaming service, and I was thinking about, if I was watching that now, would I have gotten the experience of hearing the commentary and finding out that extra level of depth?
Yeah. So bring back commentaries, please, directors.
Bring them back. Come on.
Anyway, and then as we wrap this up, your favorite horror movie of all time?
Favorite horror movie? If it's not Shaun of the Dead, it is probably Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead. Because I was obsessed with zombies when I was younger, and George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead was something that my dad showed me when I was way too young to watch it, probably. And I found it so scary and so terrifying. And it's a movie that, again, ages really well. You look back on it, and even though so many movies have been inspired by it, so many movies have ripped it off, it's still so singular. It's still so unique within that space, whether it's the look of the zombies, whether it's the pace of the narrative. I just think that is another timeless one. And also, it's a bit goofy as well. I think a lot of the best horror movies also have a bit of comedy to them, or are also a little bit silly, don't take themselves fully seriously, and kind of have that extra element of surrealism.
I fully agree with you on that. I'm not a big horror fan, but the ones that I have watched, I do enjoy. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
So as we wrap this up, Josh, the question I end all my videos on, and interviews, should I say, is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is one YouTube video or podcast in your case that you're like, don't go back and watch that, I've grown a lot since then? And then what is one that you're like, if the good people want to know my body of work, make sure you go check that out?
One that people shouldn't watch, but should watch, my reaction to my original video is the first one I've ever done. I think it was something along the lines of confessions of a PlayStation owner after buying an Xbox, something like that. It was like very opinionated. The voiceover is very bad. The video itself is quite good still, obviously, because editors make it look very good.
Yeah.
But my performance, my writing is not something that I would recommend. However, I did do a reaction video to it a couple of years ago where we kind of rewatched our old videos.
Was this during like a 2 million subscriber celebration or something?
I think it was. I think that was it. Yeah, so if you want to see me cringe through that video, you can go watch that one. And one that I would recommend people to watch is the video I mentioned earlier on Before Your Eyes. It's called The Most Devastating Video Game You've Never Played, or something. And that was a rare opportunity to get like a little bit personal in a video and kind of be more vulnerable, I suppose, is the word, in a piece of content where you're usually trying to be entertaining and quippy and what have you. But this was kind of more introspective, I suppose, and maybe that's a little bit more pretentious. But I like that one. I thought that one turned out really well.
I, as someone that's been sort of binge watching a lot of your content for research, that was one that I stumbled across, and I was like, well, yeah, that was fun. But like, as we wrap this up, Josh, obviously I want to say thank you for coming on, but where can the good people find you and your content as we wrap this up?
They can find me on any of the WhatCulture channels, like I mentioned, except wrestling. So WhatCulture Gaming, the regular WhatCulture channel, WhatCulture Horror. And you can find me if you want to see some of the worst tweets of your entire life. You can follow me on Josh Brown with 2 O's on the Brown. And you can also follow me on Instagram there as well if you want. And also check out the WhatCulture Gaming podcast, which is just the WhatCulture Gaming podcast on Spotify and what have you, because really love doing that. That's a real passion project now.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow follow the Wrestle Watch podcast on Twitter for my show with Cassidy Haynes, and bodyslam.net on Twitter for my show with Cassidy Haynes, and subscribe to bodyslam.net to get the Wrestle Watch podcast. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.